Book 1. A True Rhombic Comes in Time by Milk Nowie. Prologue. What is there for you to lose? Just let me help you, and we both get something out of it. The guy who was too good-looking for his own good and for my own comfort said earnestly. He was beginning to sound very convincing, which alarmed me a little. Just a moment ago, I was very certain that this was a bad idea. But now that he was here and explaining the situation in his own pretty words, I was beginning to doubt my decision. Although I kept an uninterested look on my face, and I hoped was doing a good job, I was actually more or less just staring at him. I hate to admit it, but I was a bit starstruck. I had seen him on TV before, but never in person. I'm telling you, it's a win-win situation for both of us. Don't you agree, Leah? I wondered if he kept his shiny dark blonde hair a tiny bit too long on purpose so he gets to do his sexy hair pushback gesture. And I was curious about how many hearts he broke with those clear blue eyes. It was no wonder Ryder Reese was a celebrity. If he didn't become a rhombic, he probably would have made a name in Hollywood nonetheless. Being so gorgeous, he could have easily become an actor or a model. I might even dare to suggest that he looked like a younger and hotter, if that was possible, version of Thor. I remember this day very well because I have never imagined seeing the infamous Ryder Reese looking this desperate. In fact, I never expected to meet him in person like this, period. After all, he was this hotshot rhombic who reached one of the highest floors inside the door. He had a chiseled look that still retained his boyishness. There was something innately dangerous in him, yet he also had an innocence about him that was very attractive. He was both the bad boy you wanted to date, and a good boy next door who you couldn't help but fall in love with and marry. Leah, are you listening to me? Did you hear what I said? Ryder asked, but I ignored him. I instantly formed a dislike toward him, because I was Leah Nowie, the weird girl who became the weakest rhombic there ever was. All rhombics had a power value of 100, but not me. It was well below the normal level, and the only reason I was allowed to continue hunting like this was because I kept it a secret. Well, a secret from everyone except Virpal Bunsell, the CIO of the Rhombic Association Center. I told her in confidence, and by no means was I asking her to help me. But it appeared that she took this matter into her own hands and sent me a powerful rhombic, Ryder Reese no less, to teach me how to battle. Listen, I don't like handsome guys in general. Their hotness makes me feel uncomfortable. Maybe it was ridiculous to be thinking about this because it was crystal clear Ryder Reese wasn't here to ask me out, and he never will, but I'm just putting it out there. I like normal-looking guys. I'm not exactly a girly girl, but I still want to be the pretty one in the relationship. And the fact that he sounded so nice didn't help either. In my short yet long 16 years of life, I have learned that nobody will ever do you a favor for free. They always made it sound like what they were offering was in my own interest, but they were all lies. I'm sure there were people out there who were genuinely caring, but it was just safer to assume they are fake at the beginning before learning more about them. I finally opened my lips. Listen, I already refused the offer. Didn't you get the message from RAC? I was so glad my voice sounded normal and nonchalant. Ryder shrugged his broad shoulders and replied. Yeah, I did, but I thought I could meet you in person and try to change your mind. You see, I'm pretty good inside the door, so I can. Pretty good. Was he actively trying to annoy me now? He was considered one of the strongest rhombics in the world, so his fake modesty was laughable. The more he talked, the more he was proving my prejudice against him to be correct. And no, if any of you are thinking, oh, this is gonna be like Pride and Prejudice, you can stop right there. It's true that I have a humongo-gigantic pride, and Ryder Reese was both handsome and rich. But I've seen the photos of his previous girlfriends, and I can tell you without an ounce of uncertainty that this guy was never going to fall for me. And even if he did, I wouldn't be into him anyway. Plus, this world certainly wasn't made of pretty ball gowns and nice gentlemen on horses like in Pride and Prejudice. This was the real modern world, plus an infinite number of ugly monsters, since the mysterious structure called the door appeared all over the world. I didn't want to waste my time or his. I was finally getting stronger, and I wanted to keep up with my progress on my own without any interruptions. And most importantly, I couldn't have him find out about my secret. So I raised my hand to stop him. "Listen, Ryder Reese, I know who you are, and I know you're pretty good. I used the air quotes, making sure he got my sarcasm. "But I really don't need your help. I can do this on my own, so thank you for your offer, but no thank you. I know you were marked months ago, and isn't it true that you still haven't even reached the 10th floor?" Ryder murmured knowingly. "Ah, there it is." Didn't take him long to bring up my embarrassing weakness to get what he wanted. Indeed, I've been a rhombic for a long time, but I was still stuck on the 6th floor hunting these damn trolls. But what he didn't know was that I now had Gomi, and that although progressing slower than the other hunters, I was getting stronger. Before I could give him some sharp response, which was my specialty, I heard an angry roar. Puerk! Ugh, it was another troll. We both turned around to see a standard-sized ogre flailing its sharp stick at us. It was time to get back to work, so I was about to summon Gomi when Ryder blocked me. Stepping closer toward the monster, he flashed me a boyish grin that probably worked magic on a lot of girls and announced, "Let me show you what I can do. Leonawi, I'm going to change your mind." Chapter 1. Sophia, what the heck is this? I asked angrily while waving a thin piece of metal at my sister on a hospital bed. I knew I looked like one of those thugs trying to collect the debt from some poor unsuspecting victim, and I knew it looked even worse because I was doing this to a patient. But man, I couldn't help it. Sophia looked a little better today, but she was still too pale and gaunt to be considered healthy. Unfortunately, her condition had been worsening since she first fell ill 6 months ago. My question to her was clearly a rhetorical one. Anyone with half a mind could tell that this metal slab was the invitation. It was made up of an unearthly colored metal, and it had the distinct rhombicosidodecahedron shape etched on it along with my name. Yes, I know. The word rhombicosidodecahedron was a mouthful, but it was the term everyone on Earth knew very well. It was a complicated geometric shape that symbolized the door, a mysterious structure that appeared all over the world over 2 decades ago. I wasn't even born then yet, but I learned from history classes that it changed the whole world. I continued to glare at Sophia. "I was cleaning when I found this hidden in your room. How could you do this to me? Why didn't you tell me that it arrived for me?" I was annoyed, and for a good reason too, but I made an effort not to raise my voice. Sophia was becoming weaker every day, and the useless doctors so far couldn't figure out what was wrong with her. I didn't want to upset Sophia if I could help it, especially because it was obvious why she did this. But at the moment, it was anger that trumped my usual concern for my older sister. With this invitation, I could become a rhombic. And if I became a rhombic, I could make a better living for both of us. And most importantly, I might even be able to find a cure for Sophia. Sophia looked away, guilt clearly showing on her face. I knew it was wrong to get angry at my sick sister, and boy I felt terrible about it, but I couldn't help it. "You know why," Sophia murmured. She didn't have to explain any further because indeed, I knew it very well. Becoming a rhombic meant I could enter the door or the pockets and fight the monsters. Sure, it was a dangerous job, but the reward from it could improve our lives beyond our wildest dreams. Becoming a rhombic meant I could enter the door or the pockets and fight the monsters. Sure, it was a dangerous job, but the reward from it could improve our lives beyond our wildest dreams. It was just me and my sister in this world after our parents died 10 years ago. I was 5 at the time, and Sophia, who was only 8 years old herself, had to grow up very fast. The only family we had left were our uncle, his wife, and his 2 children who lived nearby. Uncle Bob ran his own restaurant, and unfortunately for me and Sophia, he and his wife weren't the caring types. As soon as Sophia was old enough to work, and our uncle's definition of old enough was being able to stand in front of a sink, she was put to work in his restaurant kitchen. This was the only way for us to eat and clothe ourselves because our uncle believed charging us less than the going rate for a dingy apartment above the restaurant was more than what he was obligated to do as a family. So Sophia, and me when I got older, worked in our uncle's place to make a living. I supposed I should be thankful for that. At least this was what Sophia always told me. Vancouver was an expensive place to live. So if it wasn't for our uncle, we would have been separated by the social services, or possibly even become homeless. Promise me you won't do it, Sophia begged. Her eyes filled with worry, she whispered, you know how dangerous being a rhombic can be. Leah, I can't lose you too. Sophia's tiny body shook. Although she was older by several years, we were about the same height. Sophia used to be a popular girl with plump cheeks and a shiny reddish tint in her dark hair. But now, she had lost a lot of weight, and her hair looked sickly dull. Sophia was the cute sister between the two of us, but she often told me how beautiful I was. She would call my boring mousy brown hair caramel brown, and I would smirk at her like a little brat. I pretended not to care how I looked, which was mostly true. But I was short and skinny for my age, and oftentimes, I wondered if I'll ever fill out and grow taller. Sophia. When did this even arrive anyway? Was it 3 years ago when there were a whole bunch of extra invitations sent out? I asked, trying to calm her down because my guilt was finally driving my anger away. Over 20 years ago, countless door-shaped structures appeared all over the world. They were named the Door, obviously because whoever named it had no imagination whatsoever. There were many theories regarding these doors. Some believed that they were from God and that they led to heaven. Others believed that they were a message from the aliens. Being curious creatures, people made various attempts to enter them. But the doors refused to open for anyone no matter what was done to them. Then about a month after they appeared, the invitations began arriving at the doorsteps of some teenagers in the world. The scientists soon figured out that only those kids who received these invitations could enter the door. No one could figure out who sent these invitations, where they came from, or how these teenagers were selected. But it soon became clear that the invitations were sent only to kids between the age of 13 and 19. Once inside the door, a rhombicosidodecahedron-shaped tattoo appeared on these teenagers' wrists, and they were given superhuman powers. These special figures were nicknamed the Rhombics, short for rhombicosidodecahedron. I could imagine people being excited when this happened. It had to be like X-Men/Avengers combined together in real life. But it turned out that inside these mysterious structures was definitely not heaven. There was a whole new world inside, and all of the doors led to this same place. This dimension appeared to have an unlimited number of floors, somewhat like a giant department store. But instead of providing a juicy shopping opportunity, inside the door was filled with many different types of monsters. The higher the floor, the more powerful and vicious creatures that inhabited it. Thankfully, the Rhombics were able to fight off these monsters due to their new powers. The problem was, it appeared that this world contained an infinite number of these beasts. But because these doors were only one way, meaning no monsters could leave to enter the earth, people were relieved at first. All they had to do was not enter the doors and that would be the end of it, right? Nope, not even close. If that were the case, I wouldn't be here waving a piece of metal like a lunatic. Soon after the appearance of the doors came the pockets, named so because they contained pockets of the world from inside the door. Unlike the doors, which remained fixed where they first appeared, the pockets popped up randomly in different places at unexpected times. Again, only the Rhombics could enter these structures. And not only did the monsters live inside these pockets too, but each pocket also had one very powerful creature, nicknamed the King, that reigned over the place. Now, here was the scary part. It quickly became apparent that the entrances to these pockets were not one-way like the doors. The pockets exploded after varying amounts of time unless they were terminated, which involved the rhombics killing the kings living inside. As you might have guessed, this lesson was learned the hard way after several pocket explosions took place. They led to gruesome results in various cities. Soon after these incidents, the involved nations declared that it was all rhombics' duty to terminate the pockets as soon as they appeared. It arrived about a year ago, okay? But that doesn't matter. Leah, you understand why I hid it, don't you? How can you be angry at me when you know what happened to Mom and Dad? Sophia protested. Of course, I knew what happened to our parents. We never talked about it, so I didn't know all the details. But I knew that our parents were rhombics, and they were killed while trying to terminate one of the local pockets. Now, it was my turn to protest. But Sophia, the money I could make. I've heard that some rhombics rake in dozens of gems every time they enter the door. Whenever a monster was killed, it left a precious gem that could be sold for money. This was why being a rhombic became a popular career choice despite the danger it involved. Higher floors were inhabited by monsters that turned into larger and more expensive gems. But climbing to higher floors wasn't as simple as it sounds. Because the monsters became stronger as you went up, it was necessary for all rhombics to train in order to become stronger themselves before ascending higher. Then, there were also the tests. The 2nd, 6th, and every 10th floor could be accessed by a rhombic only if he passed a challenge given by the door. Failing these tests unfortunately meant death. Therefore, although it was every rhombic's goal to climb higher, he needed to be certain of his ability before taking these tests. Sophia shook her head as if she was scolding a little girl. I hated it whenever she treated me this way. I was 16 and therefore no longer a child. And on top of that, it looked like I was going to be a rhombic, which was a huge deal. Sophia argued, or you could die. Do you know how many rhombics get killed every year? Well, that number includes all of them who went missing, so it's not accurate. And what do you think happened to these missing kids? Asked Sophia with a snort. Well, Sophia had me there. I had to admit that these missing rhombics were most likely dead. Their bodies couldn't be found probably because they were eaten by the monsters. But no pain, no gain, right? I kept my voice even as I replied, this isn't just about the money. What about the miracle potion? This was the main reason why I wanted to become a rhombic. The door gave rewards called the gifts when a rhombic accomplished something significant like passing one of the floor tests or killing a king monster to terminate a pocket. A gift from the doors could be anything from high-quality gems, special magic weapons, or healing potions that could be poured over a wound for quick recovery. But the greatest gift that has ever been received was the miracle potion. Only a handful of it had been awarded until now, and it was known to cure any kind of illness. It was clear that the doctors couldn't come up with a diagnosis for Sophia, let alone cure her. But with the miracle potion, I knew Sophia would get better. But of course, I knew selfless Sophia would be against this idea. Being my big sister, she would refuse to endanger me in any way. Sophia begged, just forget about it, okay? No one has gotten the miracle potion in years, which means it must be all gone. Besides, I can't have you risk your life for me. Please promise me, Leah. Promise me that you won't go into that cursed door. I could see Sophia's eyes tearing up, and I knew it was pointless to argue. Sophia had worked her whole life to take care of me, and now, she was ill. I refused to make my sister upset when I knew continuing this argument wasn't going to change anything. So I promised her that I won't become a rhombic. I told her this even though I knew this wasn't a promise I intended to keep. Chapter 2. My name is RM, and I'll be your guide into the door today. A young guy in his late teens introduced himself with a dazzling smile. He was pretty muscular, and he had nice chocolate brown hair with some highlights. His hair seemed a tad too long for his face, but the confident attitude of an experienced rhombic was reassuring. I was standing inside the Canadian Rhombic Alliance Center, aka RAC. The RAC was a national organization responsible for anything related to the doors, pockets, and rhombics. Just like all the RACs of other countries, the Canadian RAC was located close to the Canadian door that appeared in South Delta, British Columbia. After my invitation was scanned and verified, I was ushered into a room to meet my guide. The first thing to do is to get you inside the door and get your marking, RM explained. The marking was a tattoo-like shape all rhombics received on their wrists the first time they entered the door. RM continued, then, as you might already know, you must attend the mandatory 3-week course run by the RAC. You'll learn everything you need to know there. As we walked together, RM provided me with the standard information. He gave me the general history of the door, and about how RAC's main duty was to keep the rhombics safe and ready. After all, it was the rhombics who kept the world safe from the pockets exploding. I followed RM out of the RAC building. The door was within walking distance, and when we arrived, I finally laid my eyes on the world-famous structure. I had seen it countless times on TV and in textbooks, but never up close. All doors were heavily guarded by each country's RACs, so most non-rhombics never got the opportunity to see them in person. The mysterious structure was a double door shape made of the same unearthly metal as the invitation. In the middle was the shape of, you guessed it, rhombicosidodecahedron. This shiny yet dull metal always managed to mesmerize me with all of its secrets and mysteries. It held so many colors that couldn't be described. It wasn't overly big, just a little bigger than the average doors of people's homes, but it was still a formidable structure. RM waited patiently as if to give me some time to admire the door. He must have escorted countless newbie rhombics before, so he probably knew how in awe I was right now. I felt both nervous and excited at the same time. You know, this might be my last year, said RM quietly. Knowing what he meant, I asked, so you'll be 20 soon? Yup, I just had my 19th birthday. I don't feel any different now, but just one more year and I might be done, RM replied nonchalantly. Most rhombics lost their power, and therefore their access to the door, in their early 20s. This could happen abruptly or slowly over time. There were a rare few whose power remained with them, but the RAC estimated this to be less than 5% of all marked rhombics. I couldn't tell if RM was excited or upset about this. He had a vague smile on his face, and suddenly feeling the urge to fill this awkward silence, I mumbled, Yay. Congrats on your retirement, I guess. RM seemed startled as he turned toward me with a confused look. Oh darn, did I offend him just now? Although I was born sarcastic, at least according to Sophia, I didn't mean anything by it this time. I was only trying to make conversation. Pfft. Ha ha ha. Phew, I was relieved to hear my guide burst into laughter. RM replied, boy, you're making me feel so old, Leah. Are you going to call me Grandpa now? Well, they do say the 20s is the new 60s in the rhombic world, I quipped. Making friends wasn't my field of expertise, mostly because I never made an effort. I was here to better my and Sophia's lives, not to enlarge my social circle, which I admit was non-existent. But I felt an immediate liking to RM, who seemed very personable. Still with an amused smile on his face, RM took a step closer to the door. I jolted a little when it began to glow slowly before opening. In my mind, I had expected it to make metallic noises, perhaps some creaking like most normal doors did. But to my surprise, it opened soundlessly. Shall we go inside? Asked RM. Everyone in the world had heard of what it looked like inside the door. No one had seen a photo of it, however, because no electronics or other Earth technologies worked inside. The first floor always looked like a forest. But it was said that the appearance of the higher floors changed often. I walked by RM's side while looking around like a tourist. Tall green trees and bushes surrounded us, and they looked no different than any forest on Earth. There was a light breeze that caused the unusually large leaves to rustle, and I heard faint noises of what I imagined to be insects. All in all, there was nothing interesting I could find around me. The only odd thing I sensed was that the air felt a little different. It wasn't that there was an odd smell, it just felt a little thicker. And yet, it made my mind feel clearer for some reason. I don't see any monsters anywhere, I commented. I had half expected to be attacked by now, which was why I brought a kitchen knife hidden in my backpack. I knew this wasn't going to be enough, but it still made me feel better. Plus, I have watched enough horror movies to know that you don't want to be caught weaponless when there are monsters around. RM shrugged and answered, they live a little further inside. It's pretty rare to see any monsters so close to the door. But don't worry even if you spot one. I'll protect you. My guide grinned at me, showing off his perfect white teeth. If he was being flirtatious, I would have given him a few of my regular snarky remarks. But I got the feeling that RM was just a nice guy. I would have returned his smile if I could, but I couldn't muster up even a small one. Truth be told, I was scared out of my mind. I have been acting calm, but calmness definitely wasn't what I was feeling right now. Was this normal? Did all the other Rhombics feel this way when they first entered the door? I was disappointed because I thought I would feel braver. Whatever the criteria were that got me to receive the invitation, it had to mean that I was meant to do this, didn't it? I was a generally anxious kid most of the time. Although I barely remembered my parents, not having them had always left a hole in my heart. Life always felt unfulfilled, and my anxiously spiked even more when Sophia got sick. I was worried for my sister and for our lives. I can't remember the last time I felt genuinely content. But over the years, I learned to act normal, as if nothing was wrong. I realized early on that sarcasm was a very effective tool to get through the day for someone like me. Money and the miracle potion for Sophia were two main reasons why I chose to do this. But there was one more secret reason I had for taking a risk. I wanted to be braver. I wanted to be somebody important. And I felt that these things could be achieved if I became a Rhombic. Growing up watching the powerful Rhombics, I dreamt of becoming confident and capable just like them. I'm embarrassed to admit it, but I secretly imagined myself as one of those popular movie superheroes like. You might think Wonder Woman would have been an obvious choice, but I was more partial to Xena, the warrior princess, minus the bang, of course. It took us only a short walk to reach a small building. I didn't bother asking what it was, but RM explained anyway. This was built by the RAC a few years ago. It encases the circle that marks you. The first thing I saw when I entered the building was the magic crest etched on the ground. It was the size of a small coffee table, and it was one of the most complicated patterns I had ever seen. It looked like several rhombicosidodecadra were overlapped together. Other than the circle, there was nothing else in the building. I supposed there was no need for anything else because anyone who entered this place was here to be marked, not to take a nap. Ready? You gotta stand over there on top of the crest now. RM's patient voice echoed a little in the empty building. So. It was finally time. The moment I got the marking, I was officially going to be a Rhombic. It was happening so fast, but I was relieved to find that my fear was mostly gone. I was a tinsy bit worried, wondering if getting the mark on my wrist was going to hurt, but there was no turning back. It was time to be fearless and become someone that mattered. I was ready. I slowly walked up to the circle and stood on top of it just as RM ordered. Before I knew it, a dim light appeared from the circle upward to engulf me. Chapter 3. I unsheathed my sword. It was the cheapest sword I could afford, and the owner I purchased from reassured me that it was a one-owner sword that was gently used. I couldn't be choosy, and this was the sharpest and most intact-looking sword I could find within my price range. Plurk! A Labrador-sized goblin shrieked at me. It was small for a goblin, and its color was a lighter shade of green, indicating that it had to be young and inexperienced. The first floor was inhabited by goblins, and they were considered to be one of the weakest monsters inside the door. I gripped my sword with both of her hands and aimed it at the angry goblin. My palms were sweating, and my legs shook because this was the third monster of the day. I was so sick of facing these disgusting green men wearing tiny flimsy rags I assumed were loincloths. Even as I huffed and puffed from dodging its sharp fingers, I vaguely wondered some nonsense about why all the goblins were males. At least I assumed they were males because I hadn't seen a single goblin wearing a rag across its chest. The goblin sprinted toward me with another screech. My body tensed even more in anticipation, and I readied myself to swing. When it got closer, I swung with a shout, "Hup!" Unfortunately, I was too slow. The monster hopped a step back before flailing its sharp claws at me. The goblin's hands were crusted with old blood and God knows what else. I was sure to get a bad infection if I let it get to me. It has been 4 months since I completed the mandatory RAC course that involved 3 weeks of learning and training. During the first 2 weeks, I was in a classroom with other newly marked rhombics learning about the basics of the monsters, doors, and pockets. The final week included the same group going inside the door and hunting on the first floor under the watchful eyes of an experienced rhombic. To successfully graduate, a rhombic had to kill at least 10 goblins. The novice rhombics often used the gems earned from this hunt to buy their first weapons. I, for one, certainly did. And if you saw my sword right now, you might have guessed how badly I did during this training. I ended up with the smallest low-grade red gems, which was why I could only afford this cheap sword. The week of indoor training was supposed to be just a formality. A rhombic became an amazing hunter with the right instinct, sharp reflexes, and unprecedented power the moment she was marked. But for some reason, I did very poorly during the training. While all the other rhombics killed their required numbers in the first few days, it took me the whole week to do the same. The class guide, which happened to be RM again, had to help me a great deal extra. I was basically his special project. In fact, RM had to search the first floor to find me the weakest goblins possible. This was the only way for me to successfully kill 10 goblins and graduate. Although my speed was only mildly lacking, my strength and my aim with the training sword had to be the worst any rhombic had ever displayed. I was essentially that runt you'll find in every puppy class. You know, the one that failed to learn even the simplest commands like sit, while the other puppies were already acing their agility training. Yes, I'm talking about that slow puppy that's always busy smelling everyone's butt while her classmates are on their way to becoming service dogs and police dogs. But at this point, you might wonder, Dad, why not just use a gun? Have you heard of this thing called the machine gun? Or maybe even a bomb? Why would anyone go all medieval and use a sword? Well, let me tell you one thing about the door. All electronic devices including phones, and any other Earth technologies including weapons, failed to work inside the door. Hence, the rhombics including myself had no choice but to prance around like those knights from the good old days. But to be fair, all rhombics were, or supposed to be, mean fighters with any weapons available to them. I have even heard of many powerful rhombics who are able to kill the strongest beasts with their bare hands. Ugh! I groaned, barely managing to block the goblin's attack with my sword. While doing this, I stumbled a little from the force. But without missing a beat, I gripped my weapon harder and boldly thrusted it forward. I was aiming for the goblin's neck, which I learned to be the weakest part of a goblin's body. But as usual, I missed it by a mile. Well, I was once again frustrated by my lack of aim, but I supposed I should at least be thankful that I missed its loincloth too. If I didn't, I would have been forced to witness the unsightly scene of a completely naked goblin. Again. It wouldn't have been the first time my poor aim failed me tragically. Remembering the embarrassing moment when I managed to strip a goblin nude during the training week, I shuddered. If I listened carefully, I could still hear the stunned gasps of the other rhombics, which were followed by RM's whisper, "Well, that's a first." The goblins didn't have hard outer skin, which meant that I just had to stab it anywhere I could reach. Jabbing its neck was no doubt the quickest way to kill it, but knowing my lack of, well, everything including power, accuracy, and all else, I had to be realistic. It seemed that luck was on my side today because when I thrusted, my sword entered the goblin's chest where its heart must be located. If anyone witnessed this last move, they might have thought I was improving as a fighter. Accurately stabbing a monster's heart had to be an impressive sight. But I knew better. I had been coming to hunt every day for the past 4 months, but I wasn't getting any better. Plurk. The goblin's pained shriek made me cringe, but this wasn't the time to hesitate. I pushed my weapon harder into the creature, and to my relief, I heard a juicy pop. The goblin, its loincloth still intact thank goodness, collapsed to the ground. I panted, unable to express the extent of my relief. This one didn't take as long to kill like the others today. And yay! I again managed not to get mauled to death today. My breathing began to slow down as I watched the goblin's dead body shrink and transform into a gem. I didn't have to see the final result to know that it was going to be a red one, the cheapest grade of a gem. Today wasn't as bad as other days, but I still had several cuts all over my body. I also knew my back was going to be black and blue when I got up tomorrow morning. The healing potions, which were too expensive for me to afford, would have been enough to make these wounds disappear in an instant. But I was barely making 3 to 4 gems a day, which meant I better make do with some band-aids. And probably not even the real band-aids, but just the no-name ones that caused your skin to come off when removing it. The goblins I have been hunting on the first floor are the weakest monsters one would ever find in the door. In addition, I only chased after the smallest ones because I couldn't handle anything meatier. A rhombic was supposed to get stronger with more experience. With a defeated sigh, I looked down at the marking on my left wrist. The tattoo-like rhombicosidodecahedron shape etched on my skin shone mysteriously, confirming that I was indeed a rhombic. So how come it was getting harder to kill the monsters? I remembered my classmates easily killing much bigger goblins during the training week. All of the other newbies were stronger and faster. It only took them 2 or 3 kills before they got the hang of how to fight. Some even leveled up on their first day. Meanwhile, even after 4 months since I was marked, I still remained level 1. Picking up the thumb-sized red gem, I summoned my display. Display. A holographic screen appeared in front of me showing several lines underneath my name. All rhombics had their own displays that were visible only to the corresponding hunter. Leah Nowie. Level 1. Power 21, Offense 10, Defense 11. Skill, unknown. A rhombic's power was measured by 2 categories, level and power. Everyone began at level 1, and as one became stronger, one leveled up. The rate of level up was different for everyone, but generally speaking, most reached level 10 within the first few months. Well, apparently everyone except me. The second measurement, power, was divided into 2 subcategories, offense and defense. The power, a total of the offense and defense values, always summed up to be 100. The proportion of the offense and defense numbers changed over time, and it varied for everyone. But the total was always supposed to remain 100. Well again, everyone except for me. From the very beginning, my power total led to be only 20, and it hasn't changed during the last 4 months. This had to be why I was so weak, and I wondered if this made me only a quarter of a rhombic. Great. The last line on the display was the skill, which was something not every rhombic had. When I first saw it on my display, I was ecstatic. It was a rare few who were blessed enough to get a skill, and it was supposed to make them into a fighting machine. A skill could be anything, and it was unique to each rhombic. For example, I had heard of a rhombic who could control water, while another had the ability to control the wind. Those who didn't have a skill didn't even have this line showing on their display. This meant that I had to have one, but for some reason, it remained unknown. Geez, was I supposed to feel lucky that I was an exception to everything? That I was special? Chapter 4. Okay, so you'll arrange an appointment with the CIO for me? I asked on the phone while walking down the street. I was on my way to sell the gems I collected when I got a call from my contact. Exhaustion and my usual frustration meant I didn't want to talk to anyone, but I was actually glad for this call. Yup, her name is Verpal Bunsel, and she should be able to answer any questions you have regarding your power value. But like I said before, it would be easier if you just tell me what your concern is. Yeah, I know, but, I trailed off. I tried to keep my tone apologetic but firm because I wanted her to back off without offending her. My RAC contact, Sarah, was being nosy. Information on an individual's display, including the rhombic's level, power values, and skill, were considered very personal. A contact was a liaison between a rhombic and RAC. Most of the time, a contact was experienced enough to provide basic help and information to her assigned rhombics. But my problem wasn't normal by any means. I needed to find out the answer to my very personal and very unusual status. And it appeared that the Chief Information Officer, CIO, of the Alliance might be the one for the job. Sarah continued from the other end of the phone. Maybe it's something I can answer you right away. The power value is a fairly easy thing to interpret. Don't you remember the 3-week course you took? I can give you a quick reminder. See, if your offense number is higher, it means you're a lead, and if you're... I moved my phone away from my ear with a frown. Did Sarah have a hearing problem? Or did she think I was an idiot? Because why else would she give me the most basic lesson out of the blue? Contrary to what Sarah might believe, I knew very well how the power value was interpreted. Everyone, except me of course, maintained a total value of 100 at all times. The offense was the capacity to attack, while the defense referred to, you guessed it, the ability to defend. The defense value also included the healing capability. All rhombics had the ability to both fight and defend themselves. But for most, one value was significantly higher than the other because they were much better at one thing than the other. Those with high offense numbers were called the lead, they were considered the powerful and aggressive alphas. The other half was called the support, and with their higher defense level, they specialized in protection and healing. The proportion of these two values fluctuates over a lifetime, but the most meaningful changes occurred when going through the first 10 floors. By the time you passed the 10th floor test, you would generally know if you are a lead or a support. I continued to trudge along, but I didn't pay much attention to my contacts blabbing. At a first glance, Sarah had a typical demeanor of a youth pastor or a camp counselor. She sounded very earnest and eager to help, but there was a hint of condescension that wasn't too hard to spot. I wasn't sure if she was like this with everyone or just with me. Sarah apparently used to be a successful lead in her teen years, so perhaps being snobby was just part of it. Sarah was still prattling, unaware that she was basically talking to herself when I finally reached the gem exchange store. I counted my lucky stars when I saw that there wasn't any lineup. I wasn't in the mood to wait at the back of a long line. Walking straight up to the teller, I handed him my bag of gems. I tried not to look too self-conscious as the teller looked over the meager result of my day's work. The teller, a guy in his early 30s, maintained a professional look as he calculated the price. Seeing that I was still on the phone, the guy whispered, "And can I transfer the money to your Rhombic account?" I nodded with an apologetic smile and gave him my debit card. My day's earnings were disappointing as usual. It had been pretty much the same every day for the past few months, but it still made me want to sigh to see how much I wasn't making. I was out of the exchange store and heading toward the bus stop when I heard Sarah finally finishing her lecture. Dash would make you a support. And I know everyone thinks it's cooler to be the lead, but support is a very important role too. At least that's what I always say. So if that's what you're worried about, that your defense number is much higher. Nope, that's definitely not it. It's something else, I replied quickly. Gosh, at this point, I didn't care one bit if I was going to be a lead or not. I wouldn't have cared even if my proportion was 0:100, making me a support with 0 attack power. All I wanted was to have the full power value just like everyone else. Alright, well, but if you could give me even just a hint of what you want to ask the CIO, I really think I might be able to help. And if I can't, I can give the CIO a heads up about what your problem is. Don't you think this will make the meeting go more smoothly? That way, you won't be wasting too much of the CIO's time. If I had both of my hands free, I would have totally applauded her. Wow, it was quite a skill Sarah had to guilt someone while still sounding so sweet. I admired her for thinking she was doing her job, but I had a sneaking suspicion that she knew she was crossing the line. I have explained to her more than once now that this was a private matter. Sadly for Sarah, her passive-aggressive bullshit wasn't going to work on a devil worshipper like me. In a sickeningly sweet voice, I admit I was mimicking her a little, I replied, "Oh, but Sarah dear, both you and I know that this is about very personal and private information. And you should know that I am not quite a dodo head as everyone might believe." Gosh, even I hated how I sounded right now. It was like I was possessed by one of those mean girls from that movie. But I was done trying to convince Sarah in a nice way. My problem was serious, and I needed help right now from the right person. I continued firmly, "So I'm afraid I would rather talk to the CIO directly." "Oh, no need to apologize, Leah." I didn't apologize, but okay. I didn't point this out, and instead, I let her continue. "I'm your contact, and I'm here to help. So I'll give you a call when I arrange an appointment for you." I hung up and sighed. That call was unnecessarily long and tedious. I had pored over the internet regarding my low power value, but I couldn't find anything. It appeared that there had never been a case where a rhombic's total power wasn't 100. Sarah was a nice enough girl, and she was my contact, but I couldn't trust anyone with my problem. As a matter of fact, I had been agonizing over whether just telling Sarah that I needed help with my power value was a safe thing to do. My worst fear nagged at me. If a wrong person finds out about how weak I am. The RAC's priority was to keep all rhombics as safe as possible. This sounded all good and reassuring, but I suspected that this could work against me. If RAC found out that I was incapable of passing even the first floor test, they could easily prevent me from ever entering the door. It wasn't that I didn't consider the possibility of losing my chance at being a rhombic. In fact, it was a struggle not to give up all hope. Sophia would say that I was too pessimistic, but I like to think of myself as a realist. No matter how much I thought about it, the odds were against me. I had been working hard for the past 4 months, yet I was still only level 1. On top of that, my power value has not budged at all. But just maybe, this CIO will know what's wrong with me. The CIO of the RAC was responsible for the growth of the local rhombics. She was supposed to be well versed in the research of rhombics' abilities and potentials. If anyone was going to have an explanation for my odd situation, it was going to be her. Bzzz. I was deep in my own thoughts when my cell phone vibrated. I saw that it was a text from Sarah. Well, that was quick. It looked like my contact managed to make me an appointment with the CIO. Chapter 5. Today was my appointment with the CIO. I was surprised that the meeting was scheduled so quickly and on a Saturday too, but I suppose the CIO must be a very dedicated worker. It made sense since a high-ranking position in RAC was a coveted position. Whoever this woman was, I think her name was Verpal, she must have worked her butt off to reach where she was. The meeting was set at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, which was going to disrupt my daily regimen. For the past several months, my routine had been spending most of the day in the door and visiting my sister in the hospital in the evening before going to work at Uncle Bob's restaurant. So it was going to be a waste of time if I only spent a few hours in the door. I would most likely end up barely killing a goblin before it was time for the meeting. I also didn't want to be sweaty and covered in dirt and goblin blood when I met with the CIO. So I decided to take a day off from hunting and visit my sister at the hospital in the morning. "Hey, Sophia. How are you feeling today?" I asked as I walked into her hospital room. Although I had gotten used to seeing my sister in the hospital, I still couldn't help my anxiety every time I was on my way to see her. I would always worry that Sophia would look much worse. She would always say she's fine, or that she's better, but her gaunt appearance made her a terrible liar. There were times when I was afraid to ask how she was, and I would immediately feel bad for being so selfish. Sophia was the one who was going through all the pain and suffering, so what kind of coward was I to want to run away like that? When Sophia first fell ill, this anxiety used to be accompanied by hope. Perhaps Sophia would look much better today. Or maybe her doctor would have good news. But after months of obvious deterioration and puzzled doctors, my hope was diminishing fast. Having a patient in your family definitely didn't help your stress level. It was like riding a roller coaster of hope and despair with no end in sight. This was why being a rhombic was so important. The more I thought about it, the more I felt certain I needed to do this. Sure, physical and mental exhaustion might kill me eventually, but I couldn't give up this God-sent chance. Sophia and I never got a break in our lives, but this could be it. I have been feeling discouraged lately for a good reason. When I first saw the invitation, I was filled with such hope. I secretly believed that I was special, and that I would become one of those star rhombics that ascended to higher floors in no time. My wild and unreasonable expectations had me imagining myself swimming in countless expensive gems. And I even saw myself miraculously, no pun intended, finding the miracle potion to cure Sophia. It was no surprise that these ridiculous dreams didn't come true, yet I was right back to grumbling about my life again. I was being an ungrateful winner. I had been angry before I got the invitation because I had nothing in this world. Yet even though I now had something, I was still complaining. Sure, this something wasn't as good as what the others have, but it was still one thing more than I had before. After pep-talking myself into renewed determination, I sat down beside my sister. Leah. Why are you here at this time of the day? Shouldn't you be at school? Sophia asked in surprise. I could already see the, "I'm going to give you the lecture of your life" look appearing on her face. Sophia, it's Saturday today. I don't like to go to school on regular days, so why would I go there on a weekend? I joked, doing an excellent job of hiding my flinch. For a second there, I thought Sophia had caught on. I haven't been going to school since the day I was marked. For an obvious reason, the rhombics had a minimal school attendance requirement to graduate. Because most of them were going to lose their powers once they reached their 20s, it was understood that they should spend more time protecting the world from the monsters than learning about calculus. Sophia's eyes widened before smiling bashfully. Because she lived in the hospital, every day must have felt the same to her. Oh, yeah. You're right. I forgot. No worries. I might have a longer shift at Uncle Bob's place tonight, so I thought I should visit you in the morning, I replied. We chatted about the usual things like we always did. Before becoming a rhombic, our conversation was mostly about my school. But lately, I tried to steer the conversation away from school and toward other things. I chatted about the customers I saw while working at Uncle Bob's restaurant or some silly things I saw on YouTube. Thankfully, Sophia didn't seem to have noticed the abrupt change in my usual topic. Or maybe Sophia did notice it, but chose not to say anything about it. I had never been fond of school, and I didn't have any close friends either. Sophia knew this, which might have been why she chose not to mention the topic of school unless I brought it up. Although I enjoyed spending time with my sister, I couldn't help feeling distracted today. I pondered about how the meeting would go in the afternoon. The best scenario would be for the CIO to know the solution to my problem. I visualized the CIO bringing out a device and going, poof, to make my problems go away. Every fiber in my body prayed for this outcome. But if the CIO didn't know what was wrong with me, what would she say? There was always a chance that the CIO decided to take away my access to the door. I slumped a little, questioning my decision to make this appointment for the 1000th time. This was precisely why I had been hesitant to ask someone for help. But I needed to do this. My level and power value haven't changed a bit after months of hunting. This was unheard of, and at this rate, I was going to get killed during one of my hunts. There had already been a few times when I got into serious danger despite how careful I was. I had been choosing only the smallest goblins to hunt if I could help it. Whenever I saw a larger monster, I ran the other way or hid myself. But there were still occasions when I almost got caught by a mid-sized goblin while running. I was also fooled multiple times by the small size. They say you shouldn't judge a book by its cover, but that's exactly what I had been doing. Size, and sometimes color, were the only features I could use to guess how strong a goblin might be. And unfortunately for me, there were times when a small monster turned out to be much stronger than I anticipated. So far, yours truly has managed to stay alive, but it was only going to be only a matter of time before I became a yummy snack for some lucky goblin. Leah, are you listening to me? Sophia's voice brought me back from my thoughts. Shaking my head, I mumbled, "Sorry, what were you saying? What were you thinking about so hard? Are you having problems at school?" Sophia asked hesitantly. She must have noticed the concern on my face. I put on a reassuring smile and lied, "No, I was just listening to the TV." I was a little alarmed by what a smooth liar I was becoming, but that was a problem for another day. I was lucky that the TV in the room was turned on. At the moment, the world was excited about the Alphas, a famous Rhombic team, reaching the 97th floor of the door. Oh, yeah. All the news channels have been non-stop about this Alpha deal. Don't you find it annoying? I mean, these people are choosing to put themselves in danger for money. So why should the rest of the world cheer for them? It wasn't a surprise that Sophia would say something negative about the Rhombics. Our parents, paired Rhombics, were killed while trying to terminate a pocket. They were in their mid-20s when they died, and it was suspected that their powers were dwindling when they took on this dangerous mission. It was foolish of them, and sadly for everyone involved, they never came out from that pocket. Feeling guilty again, I just shrugged and didn't say a word. I felt so uncomfortable whenever we talked about the Rhombics or the door. It reminded me of the fact that I was lying to the most important person in my life. I may have been getting better at it, but it didn't mean I enjoyed doing it. Sophia continued to rant, "The Alphas belong to the company named Harmony, doesn't it? I swear, that corporation is planning to take over the whole world by using those Rhombics. Most of them are just kids. Shame on them. Sophia. You know we need the Rhombics. If they didn't terminate the pockets, you know exactly what will happen." I finally spoke up. I knew I should keep quiet and try to change the subject, but it felt like I was being personally attacked by my own sister. I continued to argue, "Without the Rhombics, we'll have those pockets exploding everywhere. Don't you remember learning about what happened when they used to burst all the time? So many people died and the cities became ruined. The pockets appeared infrequently, but when they did occur, the whole city was put on alert. They needed to be terminated as quickly as possible or else, they would explode and release all of their monsters including their kings. For the last decade or so, it has become very rare for a pocket to explode. It was because the Rhombics all over the world have been working diligently. They climbed to higher floors to become stronger, and this allowed them to terminate the pockets faster. Sure, I wasn't so naive to believe that the Rhombics were doing this out of selfless reason. I myself certainly didn't become one to save other people. Killing the monsters and terminating the pockets came with great financial rewards. It also didn't hurt to get a huge boost in fame and reputation. I was doing this to save myself and my sister, but even I wouldn't mind being revered by everyone in the world. I must have looked upset, because Sophia replied, I know. I guess I'm just frustrated that these kids are constantly put in danger." Well, they may be kids, but they are powerful, so I don't think we need to be worried about them, I muttered. Sophia probably didn't notice it, but my voice was tinged with bitterness because I knew that not all of the Rhombics were strong. I, for one, haven't even attempted to take the first floor test. In order to ascend to the next floor, Rhombics needed to hunt enough to become more powerful. This was because they would find stronger monsters the higher they climbed. It was crucial for the hunters to train on each floor enough so that they know they can survive on the next level. On top of this, there were challenges, called the tests, that all Rhombics needed to pass at certain floors before proceeding forward. These tests took place at the 1st, the 5th, and then every 10th floor afterward. It was assumed that a test was provided by the door to assess a Rhombic. It was a way to make sure the said Rhombic was powerful enough to climb higher. Each test was to be taken alone, and it was reported to be different for everyone. Sarah, my contact, had mentioned that most of my classmates from the 3-week training had already passed the 10th floor test. And all of them have already found a pair or have been scouted by a team. By the time a Rhombic reached the 10th floor, it became clear if she was a lead or a support. Per RAC rules, everyone was obligated to work in a team or at least in a pair. An ideal pair included a lead and a support. Unfortunately, no one had shown any interest in pairing with me. No team has approached me either. It was no wonder since I haven't even passed the 1st floor test. I assumed that I was probably already known as a loser in this community. Many people had to know that I had been hunting only on the 1st floor even though I was marked months ago. And that big-mouthed Sarah probably didn't do me any favors either. Unsurprisingly, no one wanted me in their team. Ugh, it was like gym class all over again.
Hello. Thank you so much for listening to this story. This is my own story I wrote on Wattpad, and if you want to read the rest of it, please go to the link provided in the description. Thank you again for listening, and I hope you enjoyed the story. Also, please listen to my other audiobooks including MKHM, Miss Sun's Comatose Husband Wakes Up, and Ambitious Miss Kong, which is another of my Wattpad novel.